So, religion.
It's a thing.
What's the deal with airplane religion? Am I right? So this week, I don't know.
You
So,
just Jerry Seinfeld that.
I did. If you want to contribute any jokes to our podcast, feel free to contact us on Twitter at faithandwhatever, where we discuss whatever we want. For this week's religion topic, we are going to be discussing our understanding of apologetics. And when I say we're discussing this, I want to focus on a few key areas in particular.
Let's define apologetics first. I mean a basic definition. We don't mean the art of apologizing to somebody, right?
Yeah.
Which is something that sometimes gets confused.
Yeah. Fair enough.
The original word,
Apologia.
it comes from apologia, and it's basically a synonym for defense.
It's a verbal defense.
It is verbal?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
Verbal
but
defense.
No, you can have a written defense.
Oh, I'm just telling you guys what it says on Wikipedia.
Okay, well, Wikipedia is Wikipedia.
Which is great.
Wikipedia.
Don't ever doubt the veracity of Wikipedia.
Don't ever cite it in a paper.
Okay, but don't doubt its veracity. It's still great.
I tried to cite it in a online discussion on a celebrity, like when they were born, and the professor's like, "Please don't cite Wikipedia." I'm like, it's some celebrity. Like, if you can't cite Wikipedia on someone's
right. I mean, but put it this way: if you were in a hospital and your doctor said, "Well, Wikipedia says about your disease," you might be a little worried.
I'd be okay with that.
It's probably more accurate than most other places.
Yeah, those stupid textbooks trying to get me to vaccinate my kids. That's garbage. So, I'm totally kidding. If you don't vaccinate your kids, turn this podcast off because I don't want you to be a friend. So, so we defined Christian apologetics as verbal defense, or written defense, so speech and defense, some type of understanding like that. And so what I wanted to focus on this week, and really what I'm hoping to hear from you guys, because to me this comes in kind of the hotbed of tumultuous discussion, one that I see especially through Facebook, the medium of Facebook, and other kind of social outlets where they discuss like the transgender bill, for example, and then the Obama administration's like shooting down of that in terms of their approval towards it. There's a better way to say that, disavowing that bill essentially in written and speech form, and so. People trying to defend, Christianity's view of transgenderism, for whatever, and these things often escalate and become an assault on the Christian faith itself and an assault on the people who adhere to it. So,
do you think that's an issue right there, though?
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it's bad when people challenge Christianity, or when people.
What if people take something that's not a challenge to Christianity and try to turn it into one?
I'm okay with that, but
like, you're challenging my faith by being okay with transgender laws.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Yeah. So the idea of that being like or what I'd like to discuss in this segment specifically is your own personal experience with it, for one. So touch on that, whether or not you think as it stands traditionally, as if when what it does, well, what kind of setup you think it conveys in its traditional sense, like the defense of Christianity, and whether or not you think that's healthy for Christian dialogue, and if you do, why, and if not, what should change. Okay? So your experience, whether that's good, and why should it change, why not, whatever. So, Garrett, you want to start us off, or you want to?
Sure. Growing up, I didn't have any understanding, grasping of apologetics at all. I grew up as a borderline church attender. I grew up going to church in Houston, where I grew up, and then when I came here, I kind of youth group hopped.
Were you a CEO Christian? Church Christmas and Easter only?
Probably a little more than that. CEO plus.
Board of trustee.
And I never really got plugged into church regularly until I was in high school. But I knew without a doubt I was a Christian. I believed in God. Got baptized when I was 10. My faith was my own. And when I say go to church, it was just me trying to get someone from my family to take me. So I definitely wanted to go. It wasn't until I was in college, so I took a certain professor's apologetics class, that I really even understood what the idea of defending your faith really means. There's a lot of different ways that you can go by doing this, but the way that I was introduced to, and the way that I subscribe to, subscribed is not a word, is that it's more about being well informed about the types of questions and types of discussions you might get into, as opposed to being really ready with a singular answer. I think in some traditions and some books that I've seen, when the church, the previous youth pastor would give out a ready defense by Josh McDowell, and that's a decent text, and it's got some great support in there. But I would encourage my students, instead of being really ready with answers about how to refute, let's say, evolution, if they saw that as a attack on their faith,
Which don't.
but many do. I would say it's probably better that you be really well informed about evolution, as opposed to being well informed about why
Arguments
evolution is
against it,
false.
yeah.
Right, so that you can actually enter into a intelligent discussion and conversation with this person, and then through that, show them whatever it is that you'd like to show them about what it is that you believe. And so I spent a lot more of my time when it comes to apologetics, and I would teach apologetics classes for my students, and it would just be talking about issues that people had with Christianity. What are the biggest issues that people find in Christianity? Let's talk about those things and see how other people, scholars, denominations, authors, have answered that question.
Sure,
And
sure.
I'm not going to say any of these are right. I'm not going to say any of these are wrong. I will maybe if you ask me, but I'll let you guys pick what you think is a great response to some of the issues people have with Christianity. So I think it's part 2 and 3 of your question. I think we could definitely use more of people being well informed about some of the issues people have with Christianity. For me, one of the number one things I always encourage my students to is to have a answer for the hope that they have, right? So the Bible encourages us not to have every answer possible, not to answer everyone's...
Chapter verse.
No, I'm not going to give chapter verse, because I don't know it. Give everyone's answer, like, oh, what about this Christianity? Just instead
First Peter.
have, 1 Peter 4:12. Good job. Gets an A+ on that. Is it really?
I'm pretty sure. Keep going.
So instead, when my students worry about how am I going to answer all these questions, at the end of my apologetics classes or courses or series, I say, you know what? I want you to know why you believe, because that's the kind of question they'll ask. And you know what? If you care about this person and they care about you, that's the kind of answer that's going to have the most weight. 1 Peter 3:15.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I steer apologetics. It's probably a lot less academic and more discussion and personal faith related.
I do think your advice that you should know what you believe and why you believe it is a positive one. I would, if it was me communicating that, I would add this as well, which is, don't try to know what you believe and why you believe it based on some logical argument. I think that just fails both the person you're arguing with and fails yourself ultimately.
You want to elaborate more on that?
I don't think faith based on some kind of reasonable, logical argument, not that faith is unreasonable or not logical, I just don't think it's a very great basis for your faith. I don't think it's going to fundamentally bring deep faith to you if that's how you try to base your faith. You need to have your faith based on experience, based on habitual practice, based on...
So can you understand why that would sound very troubling for somebody who's not yet a Christian? If you were to tell them that, to not base their faith on reason and logic.
Well, I don't
on-
mean be unreasonable about your faith, but I mean is you shouldn't say, I believe because of this two-part proposal like argument, because of this like philosophical argument, because I just don't, first of all, I don't think anybody exists that way. I don't think anybody of any sort of faith or non-faith.
So no, like Pascal's wager, like I believe because I don't want to go to hell.
Right. I think
argument.
I think that fails everybody.
Okay.
I don't think the atheist has any sort of notions or belief really based on any sort of philosophical arguments. They might be able to communicate philosophical arguments that suits their belief, but I don't think any of us really have true like nobody's a patriot because of some kind of logical argument about America. You're a patriot because maybe you live in America and you feel a deep connection to American values or something like that, but not because of some like 3-point argument. I don't think a 3-point argument helps any sort of belief, really. That is not to say you shouldn't think reasonably about your faith. You shouldn't think logically about your faith or conduct yourself reasonably, but I just don't think that is a way of developing or seeding faith in yourself or in somebody else. You're never going to argue somebody into faith, right?
Right.
You're never going to give the perfect argument and suddenly a person believes, right? If you convert somebody, even if you argued with that person philosophically for years and that person came to faith, it probably wasn't the philosophical argument.
Yeah, it was
probably
a relationship.
It was probably all the other things that were happening
Yeah.
during that time. And again, there's nothing wrong with being interested in philosophical arguments for faith. I know people who would read certain books or blogs, whatever, as sort of a mental exercise. But at the end of the day, a faith built on some kind of argument, I think, never stands the test of time, honestly.
I agree with that 100%. With my students, I walk them through what I mean by sharing your faith or finding your faith is I want you to be able to tell me in 2 or 3 sentences why you believe,
Right.
and not because of like the evidence necessarily, but what made you believe? When did you decide to believe in this? Because that is a very valuable thing to share with other people.
Right, and also learn to be comfortable with stating it's not based on some kind of reasonable logical argument. There is a sort of discomfort for some people to be able to say that out loud. And probably when I was younger, I would have really loved the killer sort of Pascal wager argument, the sort of apologetic argument that would have been brought reasonable validity to me and all of my friends about why I believe what I believe. At the end of the day, that's unattainable for anything. Mm-hmm. And I had to learn to be comfortable with the fact that actually I just sort of believe what I believe because of my personal experience. And it's as simple as that. And I'm okay with that. My personal experience is very authoritative for myself.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's hard for you to be wrong in that.
Now, would you argue? Well, you would argue varying degrees of validity amongst personal experiences.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, mine is mine,
mm-hmm.
right? And that's what's going to be most important to me.
That's interesting. I would push on that a little bit. Chris, what do you think?
I don't have a whole lot to add on this. I think James is right. I think people who are looking for knowledge and hard fact to try and justify their belief system are never going to find anything that really satisfies them.
Right. It's kind of it's a very dangerous road to go down.
Yeah, there's not enough archaeology. There's not enough whatever hard science.
And
you
Jesus
can
says
find.
that. And Jesus says, "Blessed are those who believe
And have
and
not
who did
seen."
not see."
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And not that you have to never see anything, but
Right.
you have to be okay with.
And
there
not-
is some value in believing and not being.
You don't
able
have
to. See.
to be stupid and irrational and just throw away science, like Christians are often accused of doing.
Right.
But to try and use that solely to justify your faith or your viewpoint is, it's going to fall apart sooner or later.
What has been your personal experience with apologetics and people who kind of lean that way in your own lifetime?
I don't have a lot of personal experience with that. I don't.
Done really good at avoiding Facebook for a number
Well,
of years.
So you have to remember, I grew up in Christian school and a Bible club and Bible study, and I went to Hope for a year. And so by the time I was a young adult, it was really, the internet was already a thing. And to all like the online arguments about religion, I was tired of the real life arguments about religion.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I've just avoided it. I have discussions about religion with some of my close friends, and I have friends from a lot of different viewpoints, and some quite opposite of anything anyone in here would take. But I'll have discussions, but arguments or like serious apologetics, it's just, I feel like it's a waste of time in a lot of people looking for those arguments have already decided what they believe.
Yeah.
They're not going to change their mind, and they're not going to change yours. So, save your breath, go out and get dinner or whatever.
Serve someone.
Yeah, work on the relationship. Don't bother with the
that's
argument.
Fair. Yeah, absolutely.
And the reality is there's something that it does well and there's something it doesn't do well at all. Apologetics tends to bolsters the believer's faith, right?
Okay.
Those who take apologetics seriously, what it usually ends up doing is protecting themselves than it does
doubt.
actually, from doubt, than actually converting anybody. I've never seen anybody really converted by apologetics. I've seen people who are believers who are convinced by the power of apologetics.
Right.
And if that's going to do something
Like a
for you,
cosmic pat on the back.
yeah, I don't think that's a great thing necessarily, but at least let's admit, if we're going to use apologetics in any form, let's use it for what it actually does. What it does is it fortifies belief.
And I don't
So
think
is there a
that's
way to
exclusive
properly?
us either?
Right.
Because I think we see it in all the movements.
Yeah.
Sure.
But something I'm always curious about is, you go on to what we'll call internet, the platform
always
of
be
the
ready.
internet debate, and what you're going to see 9 times out of
careful.
10 when apologetics and religion are the topic is it's Christianity versus atheism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I've always wondered, why do we not? What's up with why is Christianity so die hard in representing that half of that debate? Like why us and not Hinduism, or why not Buddhism, or why not even like sectarian like splits from Christianity, like Jehovah Witness or Mormonism or something like that.
We should all get on one big team. Is what you're saying?
Well, no, what?
No, you're right. You do see that, but one of the reasons for sure is because in things like Hinduism and Buddhism, they're not a converter vehicle religion, right? And so that's
I think they're becoming increasingly more.
Yeah, but
so
not,
though.
not
But
so
you could
much.
say with Islam.
Not,
Yes,
I
with
would say
Islam,
more-
I kind of
Fair.
avoided saying Islam.
I do see that with Islam.
Yeah, and they do it.
Yeah.
But traditionally, that's one big reason. I have found a funny story that I think you may or may not know.
Oh, we just lost. Oh,
Are we back?
Audio's out.
Yeah, audio dropped out.
And it's back.
Okay,
Yeah, hold on.
1, 2,
We get a beep.
buckle my shoe. Beep boop beep. Oh, we're not even recording right now, are we?
Beep, beep, boop, 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 boop.
So one funny story, right, that you may or may not be aware of. I was talking to that same professor, and we were talking about how he was at a debate that was like a William Lane Craig versus like a Christopher Hitchens type thing, and like when he was at Biola, and they went to this debate, and he was sitting there watching them, and it was whatever, like clear that William Lane Craig had won or something like that, and he heard these two girls talking and on their way out, and one of them was a Christian, and one he said he assumed wasn't, right? And she said, "So what did you think of the debate?" And she goes, "I don't care if he won. I'm still not going to convert to Christianity because he was an a-hole." And so he just walked away like feeling defeated, and I have found that tends to be the case. It feels like we start kind of with the wrong intention in mind, where we forget that Christianity or everything is axiomatic in its roots, right? Understanding that like we assume it.
What does that mean?
Like you assume a certain truth, or you assume something is correct about something. And so if the entire premise of what we're believing is based on the assumption that a guy rose from the dead, like literally stopped being dead there, pretty much nothing else is going to be hard for us to believe as far as the Christian faith goes in that thing.
Yeah.
And so we use that logic, or we use ration, or we use archaeology or historical things that are, I personally think, all are great things and are necessary things. I love the understanding of manuscript studies. I love how you can put the New Testament together, with the pieces and the fragments that you find before, 325 AD or whenever the Codex Sinaiticus was found. I think those things are great, but at the end of the day, we try and, especially in the West, like bolster logic and reason above the rest of the Wesleyan quadrilateral, which if you don't know is you kind of think of four things, and you have reason, tradition, scripture, and experience, and those things.
And what Wesley was saying is that these four things affect what you believe,
Yeah.
no matter what. I mean, even if you don't want them to,
Yeah.
all four do and will.
Yeah, and so if you are somebody who claims atheism for yourself, you reject Christianity, you reject tradition about religious tradition, you reject scripture, whatever. And so the Wesleyan quadrilateral has kind of grown to include science now. But I think it's interesting because we almost like downplay the validity of the personal experience there. Like I have come to realize that the reason that the scriptures have so much power in my life, one of the reasons is because they're powerful in and of themselves, I believe, but also because of like the fact that I'm taking them and I'm applying them and I'm practicing them and I'm watching who I believe to be Jesus and the Holy Spirit transform me, make me a better husband, make me more loving, make me more caring, teaching me how to be more patient and gentle, and and the list goes on and on. But I do like the idea of being able to have a deep and very rich understanding of the logic and the rationale. I think those things are good, and I don't think anybody would.
Sure.
I don't think anybody here would disagree with that. But the thing that gets me in apologetics in their traditional sense is, to me, it feels like it just furthers the chasm between us and people. Like it feels like I feel like when I sat in an apologetics conference maybe 2 years ago now, and I just felt so uncomfortable because it felt like we were just digging a moat, around the bubble of us and the rest of the world on the outside. And like we're hearing like, oh, this is what Islam believes, this is what Christian, and it's like I'm hearing this from a Christian telling me what Islam believes, and it didn't make sense, right? It didn't resonate. It's like I would rather, because I ran 3 or 4 things by some close Muslim friends of mine, and they're just like, we don't believe that at all. Maybe they're more moderate as Muslims and blah, blah, blah. And so it's easy to critique the fundamentalism, which is something that you see a lot, especially in the Christian Islam debate, right? The kill everybody kind of thing that you see. And it's like, well, there's also, pieces of the Quran that actually say don't do that and give refuge and safe haven for those people anyway. So, when we do apologetics in the traditional sense, it feels very isolating to me, and I have a really deep spiritual problem with it, which is why I was like kind of curious about your guys' thoughts, because it feels like it creates this further alienation and this us versus them that I feel is absolutely counter to Jesus' ministry.
I think it comes also from an unnecessary desire to fit in with the empirical guys.
Yeah.
So let me use a metaphor to get into my point, or a similitude, that it's sort of, there's a discussion among like video games and music and movies about whether these things are art. And the reason why the video games industry wants their video games called art is they believe that somehow if video games can be called art in popular conscience, then somehow video games have risen to a certain echelon. Mm-hmm. And if we're not art, then we haven't risen and we haven't legitimized our video games. And there's sort of a pushback to that, saying, no, video games are just video games. Now, obviously, there's artistic elements to video games, and like we're not going to argue over that. At the end of the day, why must we convince anybody video games are art? What's the point of that? Right. Why can't art be art and video games be their own thing? Well, Christianity is a community-based revelation, right? That's what it is. And in our popular conscience right now, there's this desire to play the empirical truth game.
Yeah.
Where we want everybody, including scientists, including philosophers, including those who play with, who live in the realm of debating empirical reality. We want to be legitimized among them. Why? Why? I mean, I'm not against those things, but I don't understand why those two worlds have to cross at the same time. Why do we have this desire?
All truth is God's truth, man.
Right, but even the Bible represents God's truth as a revelation. It's not really empirical for the most part.
Well, you remember how excited everyone was when Bill Nye was going to debate what's his face?
Ken Ham.
Yeah.
We watched that debate. It was so boring.
Did anybody actually think like at the end Bill Nye was going to be like, "Well, you got me,"
right?
I don't watch
that
those.
crap you made up about the ark was so convincing.
Well, they weren't actually debating Christianity versus.
Right.
They were debating about whether Christianity should be taught as an alternative to science in public schools.
But I mean, even there's just those
No.
kind of things that there's like the Christian base gets all riled up about.
Right.
They get all
No.
excited, and you shouldn't be ignorant,
And here's the
especially in this
frustrating-
day and age. I'm
Well-
not saying ignorance is a sin, but when you have as much access to information as we have, there's no excuse for ignorance anymore.
Right.
But to spend so much time and it's like a pep rally, you know?
Right.
And it's so useless.
And all it really was a way for Ken Ham to get a whole bunch of cash
And publicity
and
for the Creation
publicity
Museum.
for the Creation
to
Museum.
make that stupid ark.
Yeah, all we did was fulfill his real evil genius plans of fulfilling this Creation Museum, finishing it, and getting a bunch of capital for that. And he purposely stoked fire to create publicity to get the money, and
So he was
that's
using Bill Nye's playbook.
right. And that's,
Bill.
and I'm not justifying any side here. I'm just saying that wasn't Christian.
But that's why the whole thing is.
Right.
It's almost like you're talking about trying to have worlds cross over. I mean, there was definitely crossing over into the world in that sense.
Being in but not of.
No,
So,
being in and
we were
of.
totally
And it's interesting. So I guess I'll look for, a sentence summary conclusion in our thought process here. But I think maybe we would all say that an idea to consider is the next time somebody challenges you to like a super defense of your faith, it's important to analyze. Well, I'm going to say this. Traditional Christian apologetics, as we kind of understand them, are stupid. I'm just going to say that. That's how I feel about it.
Okay.
I think they're dumb. I totally think you're right.
But there is one more thing before we wrap up. Remember when Dad was talking about going to London and Speaker Square and debating there with Muslims? So our dad went on a mission trip, and he told me one of the things that was really odd to him is we don't generally like
Conflict.
here in America. But he said in London, the culture is very different.
Yes.
Where people do like to argue with each other, and then you go and you get a cup of coffee, and it's not a big deal. Nobody takes it personal.
Right.
And there is actually conversion sometimes from these debates there.
yeah,
But it's a cultural difference as much as anything.
right.
And so that's what I think is extremely interesting, is being aware of the culture in which you find yourselves, because I think that's what being part of what Romans 12:1 calls us to do in terms of being in the world, is that being aware of like where you are situationally and what you've come across. And so if we can teach people, if we can teach believers, if we can teach Christians how to think instead of necessarily what to think. I think we will be better off in the long run of not just creating and cultivating a more intellectual Christianity, but also a more honest Christianity, and one that's more willing to wrestle with just the doubts and the tensions that are a natural part of faith. Because when it's all said and done, guys, girls, we believe that somebody literally rose from the dead.
Right.
I mean, it's like, it's not...
Yeah. But
he rose from the dead. No?
Yeah.
No? Not crazy, anybody?
Yeah, we've already jumped the shark to start with. So.
But here's the problem with, I guess here's the ultimate
He flew away.
self-defeating problem with apologetics, is it implies that we're not going to listen so that we can talk, right? Apologetics that listens to the other side isn't really apologetics anymore. And the thing is,
It's just a dialogue at that point.
it's not even a dialogue; it's a monologue,
Yeah.
right? Apologetics is really a monologue.
No, the one that listens to the other side
right.
before talking.
Whereas like apologetics, you only listen to the other side in order to defeat the other
Yeah,
side, not to really listen.
And
So we
Yeah,
are
that's so interesting.
we are expecting. So apologetics expects the other side to listen to it without giving the fair shake there.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And
But
so it's
that's not
self-defeating.
fair.
Why would anybody? So the apologetics forum is self-defeating because nobody's there to listen to the other side, and so
Yeah.
it's not going to do anything. At least in the American
Context.
like situation. Yeah.
Yeah. So next time somebody challenges you, in a way that's kind of patronizing to your faith,
Say no, thank you,
pray for them. Or ask them how you can serve them
Yeah.
instead and see what happens.
or throw tomatoes at them.
Or burn them at the stake, whatever year we're living in. I don't know. So, if you have any thoughts on this, if you are an apologist specifically, I will not apologize for calling it stupid, but please let us know in the YouTube comments. We would love to hear from you, so that way we can understand why we're wrong or
Come
why
at
you
us,
think
bro.
we're right.
That's pretty much what YouTube comments are for.
Amen.
Apologetics.
Yeah, we need to make more people angry.
We
so
are
we can
four
get-
white devils, and we are looking forward to taking you down.
And rock music is okay,
And
not a
so,
sin.
Facebook.com/faithandwhatever, Twitter.com, and then we are faith, the letter in, whatever, and we'll talk with you there.
Awesome.
See ya.